Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm talking today about the thing you've been hearing about, Rahu, Mars, Uranus in Aries. Here it is, folks. End of the world coming. Excuse me. Definitely been hearing a lot about this from the Western astrology world. I've been talking about the Mars Rahu conjunction since last year. But when we put Uranus in there, one of these outer planets used in Vedic, used in Western astrology, that's not always visible to the naked eye. It's very hard to see, but you can at times see it. When we bring Uranus in, you can see that exact conjunction of Mars and Rahu, which is coming. Whoops, is this the right one? Oh, wait a minute. Is that the one that I wanted to use? I thought there was a more updated one. Um, but that well, this is the 28th. It's actually an early. I'll bring up the chart, but coming in early August, like August 2nd, is we actually have Mars, Uranus, and Rahu all joining at about 24 degrees, right? Like August 2nd. So again, I've been talking about late July, early August since last year because of Mars Rahu joining. But then you bring Uranus, the outer planet, which is a planet of uncertainty and novelty, and also what you would call disruption and volatility. Then it looks quite intense for sure. And of course, there's been a lot of talk, especially in the Western astrology world, because of Uranus, even more so than the North Node. Just Mars Uranus would be like a huge thing because Mars crosses Uranus like every couple years because that's the Mars orbit. But then you bring the North Node in, and it's even more volatile. Most Western astrologers interpret this as that Rahu, the North Node, just kind of magnifies things, which that's not the wrong way to. Geez, I'm sorry. That's not the wrong way to interpret it, but it doesn't just magnify. It magnifies and polarizes and amplifies things in a very unpredictable way that is just as destructive as Mars. It certainly can be, especially to like worldly events. It's what causes eclipses. So in many ways, the Rahu quotient, I think, is more volatile than the Uranus quotient because it's what creates eclipses, and we can see these things. So I'm going to be talking about this in great detail. Before I get into it, though, just to do a little housekeeping, please like and subscribe and share the video. I think you'll like this one a lot. I think you'll like them all. Most people, really enjoy hearing these updates, but I'm going to be explaining how to look at the outer planets in Vedic astrology and use them. I'm going to be looking at the transit of Uranus through Aries, which started actually in the middle of 2016. So we can look at that historically. And this is a way to really look at the outer planets. When I do look at them, I look at them more in this way because they're not visible, showing like the visible karmas expressed as like expressed visible karma. They're more like subconscious, unconscious forces on a personal level. On a cultural level, though, they also can show larger trends. So I'll be talking about that. But again, if you like this kind of content, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also, as you see, there's a ticker there at the bottom. I have just started my member site again, which I'm very happy about. People have been waiting for this. Only 50 cents. You can get a 14-day trial and get daily forecasts, also new and full moon forecasts, also a monthly planner where you have the whole month laid out for you with all the planetary shifts, and also hours of classes. And again, it's not just me, but some of my best students. Sebastian Uria is doing these daily forecasts based on the Indian Panchanga, which is the way they've been measuring time forever. Based on the nakshatra, the tithi, or the lunar phase. For example, today is the new moon in Cancer, right? The new moon is a tithi, one of the 15 phases of the Shukla Paksha, of the of the waning moon, and then also of the waxing moon. There are also 15 days. So in Indian astrology, there's not just the gibbous moon and the balsamic moon. Every day is a different moon. It's 15 days. That's why we have a month. Month is actually codified from moon. That's why each month is about 30 days, which is a lunar cycle. And every lunar day is analyzed, is called a tithi. Again, so we should be analyzing the moon every day, not just the tithi, but the nakshatra. The moon moves into a different nakshatra every day. And also the moon is in a certain rashi or a certain sign every day. And then there's also a certain vara, or the lord of the day. So these four things are like the anchor of the panchanga. The way I use it, it's been a modified panchanga, and Sebastian has really taken that and started doing his own forecast, and they're fantastic. And also my student and graduate Melissa Flores Davies has started doing Davis has started doing a monthly calendar with a planner and whatnot. So you get that as well. And then also the full and new moon forecast for me. So again, you can try it 50 cents for 2 weeks, get the forecast, get the updates and the free classes, 10 hours of free classes at astrologytraininglab.com. Let me drop the link in there. I didn't do it. I'm going to do it. HTTP. I forgot to do this. A little bit disheveled at the moment, a little bit. Astrologytraininglab.com. You see the link there going at the bottom. All right, so let's get into this chart though here. And in fact, I'm going to switch over to the chart that I have here. Let me share the screen here and bring up the software chart. And first, I'm going to start with showing that you see this is when Uranus, now this is sidereal astrology. And of course, if you're listening to Western astrology, by the way, I want to be clear, it doesn't mean it's wrong, but they use a different zodiac. The zodiac in Western astrology is not aligned with the sky, even though they use the same zodiac sign names. They say Taurus and Aries and all like that. But in Western astrology, Aries is not that section of the sky. Aries begins on the vernal equinox, and those things are different. It's not the same thing. So again, even though they use the same names, they say Aries when you're used to Aries being a place in the sky. That's not what Aries is in Western astrology. Aries is the vernal equinox. So from there, it's called tropical zodiac, where the zodiac is pinned to the seasons, not to the sky. It's very simple, but important to understand. So in Vedic astrology, we use the sky. The constellation, that section of Aries, that section of sky known as Aries, is the same as it's been for 10,000 years ago and 10,000 years in the future. And it's aligned another thing called Ashwini, which is the nakshatra. So that's literally, when you look in the sky, that's the section of the sky that you see. By the way, an astronomer would say the same thing. It's Aries. That's the section of sky. Okay. So again, in Western astrology, because that's not what they call Aries, Aries is vernal equinox, that shifts the zodiac. So in Western astrology, Uranus is in Taurus. So this is why, if you're hearing this and going, you're saying Aries, why don't you learn what you're talking about? It's Taurus, you dummy, which is what people say to me. And I just give a simple reply, look up sidereal zodiac. And then they're like, oh, I had no idea. So if you're not aware, this is why. Okay. So Western astrology, you perhaps have heard it's in Taurus. Well, again, Taurus is extrapolated from Aries being the vernal equinox, not being the sky. So the actual sky is Aries, that constellation, and Uranus entered Aries, again, sidereal Aries, in the middle of 2016, June 2016. Okay. Think about June 2016, what was going on, let's say politically, culturally, etc. And since then, Uranus has been going back and forth through Aries. Well, I can remember a lot that was happening in the summer 2016. For example, the political presidential campaign that was going on with, Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. That was June 2016. So this is right when Uranus went into Aries. So since that time, Uranus has been in Aries. And if you use the USA chart based on the Sibley time, which was extemporaneously rectified to be 6:30 p.m. On July 4th, 1776, you see that the USA has a Scorpio ascendant. So particularly if you're using US politics, would be a Scorpio ascendant. And this Uranus is going through the 6th house of the USA chart, which is 6th house is battles, struggles, enemies, conflicts, things like that, right? So Uranus, this is in the middle of 2016, Uranus went into Aries, okay? So again, you're asking why I'm talking about that now. Well, because if we move forward to where we are now, again, Uranus has been in Aries this whole time, 2021, 2022. This is like June 28th, 2022. Now you can see this Mars-Uranus Aries going. Now let's move this forward a few weeks, and we'll get to where we are right now. We're about right here. So this is July 20. I'm on July 28th today. So this is where we are today. We're right here, right? You see Mars is 2150, Uranus is 2427, and Rahu is 2508. So as you see, as we keep going, you see Rahu keeps going back and Mars keeps going forward. So they're going to meet all at about the same degree here, 2422, 2425, 24. This is exact. 24 degrees. This is on August 1st, August 2nd, again, 2425. So really like on August 1st, this is why I've been talking about this time, not including Uranus. I wasn't even talking about Uranus. I was talking about Rahu Mars coming together at this time last year, that when this happened, we would see a lot of unpredictable, explosive type of events. I definitely started to key on things like the possibility of assassinations, upheavals, maybe social chaos, social disorder, things like that. That winds up, really transforming our world. That was just with Rahu Mars. And again, I just want to stress, I don't discount the use of outer planets in Vedic astrology. A lot of people use them a lot, particularly what you would call Neo-Vedic astrologers. There's a whole group of astrologers who call themselves Neo-Vedic astrologers, and they really rely on outer planets a lot. In fact, as much as they rely on the visible planets. And that's fine. Many of them started doing Western astrology, so most of their practice revolves, or a lot of their practice revolves around those outer planets, and it's perfectly legitimate to use them. However, and some people just don't get, well, how can you not use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in Vedic astrology? It's not progressing with the times and all like that. Frankly, none of that is true, because the visible planets show the visible karmas that we're looking at, particularly if you're doing natal astrology, right? And trust me, there are so many other things in Vedic astrology, especially when they're done correctly. All of the yogas, the 27 nakshatras, 16 harmonic charts, and also especially applying the rules correctly and properly, like Raja yogas, what makes karmas ripen, the dasha cycles in the harmonic charts. There is so much subtlety, complexity, nuance that it's very easy to see what is visibly happening, the visible karma on Earth that pops out. And again, this is why archetypally or sensibly, why Vedic astrology just uses these 6, or the planets out to Saturn, which are visible to the naked eye all the time. They show the visible results of our incarnated form here on Earth, our janma, our incarnation into the body, into the wheel of time, and the visible effects of that. And then you analyze those visible planets down to very specific levels. Plus, by the way, Vedic astrology is not just out there in space. It's plugged into Sankhya philosophy, which energizes things like the chakras and the nadis and the dhatus in Ayurveda. And all of this lines up with the visible planets. For example, the chakras are each ruled by planets. The sun and moon rule the Ajna chakra, then Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn rule the other chakras with a masculine and feminine expression. All of this is very locked down and tight when you just use the visible planets. Not to mention, for example, the Sapta Dhatus in Ayurveda. There are 7 Dhatus, there are 7 Grahas, not including Rahu and Ketu, which are the Chaya Grahas, or the invisible planets. So it's absolutely 100% possible, and I think even preferable, to first learn how to do Vedic astrology without outer planets, because it's not part of the system for a good reason. Not because they didn't know it, or because they're closed, or they're too religious, but because it's part of a system that also includes yoga and Ayurveda, and the system works. It's locked down tight. But of course, using outer planets is fine, especially if people learn how to actually do Vedic astrology the way it's intended without outer planets. For example, it's like doing Ayurvedic medicine and learning how to do Ayurvedic medicine as it was conceived of first, and then bringing in modern approaches, modern things that maybe aren't in the texts, but that you can apply. But if someone never learns it properly, then it's hard to bring in things that add, because now are you really practicing it the way it was meant to be? And can you do that? Or are you just falling back on things that maybe are sort of like shortcuts, but are disconnected from a certain root element of the tradition? Same is true with yoga. Again, we have all kinds of forms of hybridized yoga practices now, meditation practices, and they're very disconnected often from the roots, from like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and why pranayama works, and what the proper method is for, mantra and tantra and yantra, and how energy moves through the body and the breath and the mind first. Then you can expand upon that with hybridized ways of, kinesiology and other types of, modern approaches to how the body works. But if you're just using, for example, yoga in a physical postures way, and you're disconnected from the root traditions, then it often just turns into physical exercise. This is an example of how I see outer planets working within the structure of classical Vedic astrology. So with, having said that, the way I see Uranus really playing out here is it's more of a cultural thing. Again, I just showed you when Uranus entered Aries, and it entered Aries at a very specific time in US history, world history, the rise of like Donald Trump and this anarchistic sort of, extreme. Now, as we're looking at it, like, it was 2016, as we're looking at it 6 years later, it's made the rise of nationalism. We've been through an insurrection. We had this president who was impeached twice. And our world in the West, especially in America, has been completely turned upside down by this anarchistic figure. Regardless of whether you like him or not, just in a very neutral term, it's blown everything, what we are and our preconceptions about our about like our identity as a nation, as far as in America, upside down. And one of the things that I see that this Rahu Mars Uranus is bringing is accountability and a sense of justice, at least with all these January 6th hearings and these kinds of things coming out now. We're seeing this kind of sort of revelation coming out, where we're seeing this, and it's really polarizing it. Like, at this point, you sort of have to make a choice. Are you on this side or on that side? And again, there's those who are just going to stay on one side of, where they think Trump is, whatever he did, it was fine, and it's all just a smear job and fake news and all this. Then they're going to have to really, really double, triple, quadruple down on that. But then you're seeing the others who maybe liked him and liked the idea of chaos and, make America great and America first, or whatever it was ideologically. But this guy himself, it's like, no. So on that level, we can see that pretty clearly, I think, that it's kind of polarizing this idea. And also really the rest, let's say, just of the culture and sort of politically, it's showing us like, yes, this is kind of an inflection point, where this transit of Uranus through Aries this whole time it's now joined Mars and Rahu. Mars is the ruler of Aries, so it's showing the power and the courage and the willingness to fight for one side or the other in it. It sort of polarizes things in that regard. So that eccentric kind of social movement, which began in the middle of 2016 with this former celebrity who is now rises to become president, that countercultural movement, which began then, is now getting blown up in a lot of ways. And again, it doesn't mean that from here it doesn't continue. Maybe it continues, and maybe he comes out stronger and even more. I don't think that's going to happen, frankly. I don't think that's likely. By the way, I'm not saying that he couldn't get the nomination maybe in 2024 or whatever. I'm not making predictions about that because that's a different thing. But what I'm saying is that what it's doing right now is showing this right in front of us. It's polarizing the issue to the point to where now we really see this thing. And again, maybe it makes someone double and triple down even more in saying, well, now I know it was a hoax and all these people are just rhinos, or I don't know, whatever the explanation would be. But it's also definitely showing the other, where people who are not just dyed in the wool in that regard are having a kind of sort of reckoning moment. We're seeing with the laws here in the US as well. We're seeing some laws being passed trying to codify elections, trying to avoid the kind of thing that happened, let's say, in January 6th, because that really was a sort of culmination of this rebellious movement, I think. So a lot of what's happening politically, at least what we're seeing in the US right now and in the courts, I think is really being shown by this Rahu, Mars, Uranus, particularly when you trace Uranus back to having entered Aries in the middle of 2016. And this Aries type of, Aries is a sign of a dictator. Hitler had 4 planets in Aries. So, by the way, at this point, I'm sorry to say, whether you think it's not fair or not, the comparisons to Trump and Hitler are not unfair. I'm not saying with genocide or anything like that, but I mean as far as things like co-opting messages, propaganda, even things, insurrections. I mean, again, I'm not going to educate people about that. But it's not an exaggeration at this point, at least to say that as far as political ends and what the comparisons of a small minority of people, which is what the fascists were in Nazi Germany, they were about 20 to 30% at some point, and they wound up running the country and by brute force, and it became like a dictatorship. And again, these are not unfounded fears at this point when you see the mounting of insurrections and stuff like that. So I know people evoke Hitler and it's like, oh my God, but at least certain comparisons, again, I'm not talking about genocide and extermination of Jews and all that, but I'm talking about as a strategic rise to power, we would be absolute fools to not look at the parallels at this point, and also culturally. So with the rise of white nationalism, there's all kinds of stuff there that's going on in the country where we're seeing this kind of this vicious underbelly has been unleashed since Rahu went through Aries. This where we can see that in this type of politics. Of course, around the world, we're also seeing, like in the U.S., the things with the courts and whatnot. Definitely, obviously, has also shown with the deprivation of women's rights and stuff like that. So one of the things I want to say is that we've already seen a big result of Rahu Mars. And again, you can put Uranus in that as well. I didn't even include Uranus in this because I don't use Uranus, necessarily within this framework. But it does make sense in this type of context, especially if I were to use Uranus and I would have went back and looked, I would have been like, okay, yeah, it is lining up here. It is relevant. And then, like I did before this video, I went back and checked and said, oh yeah, Uranus entered Aries right at the rise of Trump and Trumpism and the whole proliferation of what we now have being exacerbated even more. This fake news, this polarization, this siloing of information. Of course, this was exacerbated more by the pandemic. A lot happened since 2016. I'm not just saying Trump. But that, as a political movement, has also been what has bifurcated things even more. Because then once we had a pandemic, he was president. So it got even more polarized, where we're suspicious of the CDC and Fauci and the whole kind of, again, environment has done nothing but bifurcate this. And I'm not blaming Trump for all of it by any means, but I'm saying that's definitely a figure that we could see as Uranus in Aries figure that rose in the middle of 2016. And now we're seeing a reckoning for it. That's the point as well. We're seeing these hearings are going to continue, right? So I think one of the reasons why there's been a mitigation of the potential disaster, again, I said that there could be I was talking about assassinations and these kinds of things. By the way, it could still happen for sure into early August, with as long as Mars is in Aries and close to Rahu. Again, it's until like August 10th or so. Let me move this forward. Again, it crosses Rahu, but Mars goes into, yeah, August 10th. I thought that was the date that Mars goes into Taurus. To me, that those are the important, between now and August 10th, there's definitely heightened awareness. And again, the assassination of Shinzo Abe was definitely completely shocking and unexpected and predicted by me, where I didn't say who it would be, but that there would be maybe high level assassination. I don't think the danger is over. We still see so many threats to officials. I just saw where Nancy Pelosi was going to go to, like, where was she going? Was she going to South Korea somewhere? I don't even remember where, Taiwan maybe. And again, places where, imagine if we had some kind of, like, dangerous assassination or something like that, what that would mean. And so I don't think these dangers are over by any means. So especially through early August. And so I do think that bringing Uranus into this is legit, for sure. I will say this, though. I don't necessarily think that the Uranus impact has as much to do with a visceral event right now as Mars and Rahu. This is how the outer planets work, in not just my judgment, but in my observation. I think it's more legitimate to be tracking the transit as a long-term trend. Again, the fact that it's joined, it could very well be that something does happen, let's say between now and early August, and someone could say, yeah, see Uranus, see, it was Uranus, simply because it's joined Mars and Rahu. To me, it's Mars and Rahu which would be making the explosive thing, because it's the visible thing. Again, it's hair splitting, and I'm not saying that it's illegitimate to bring Uranus into this. In fact, it does align that with the cultural consistency that I'm talking about. But it's also something where I would say that this is in Aries, not in Taurus. I will say this, though, in fairness to maybe even to what some Western astrologers would be saying about the fact that it's Taurus, is all of the economic issues that we've been talking about. One could legitimately say that for sure, because we've been having all of this economic pressure and strain, and one could say that that's more related to Taurus. Absolutely. It's fair. It's definitely a fair point. And so, again, but then you would look at when Uranus left Aries, you would have to, if you're tracking this and you're being comparative, then you would go back and see, okay, so that means that Uranus was in Aries, back in 2010 or something? That's when it went in, or 2012? Again, so then you would have to make that consistent with Uranus in Aries, and then it went into Taurus in, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's when COVID happened or something. I don't know. I haven't tracked it. But again, like I said before, like I said at the beginning, I'm not saying both zodiacs don't work. But I'm saying that, as I would see this, I would read this as Aries, that since the middle of 2016, Uranus in Aries has shown exactly what I'm saying it has shown. And right now, with Mars and Rahu lining up with it, we're seeing this sort of explosiveness around it. And this is explosive to the whole Trump world, the whole kind of this moment is going to get harder to maintain, because it's getting just blown up, man. And it's not done. I already predicted that I would not be surprised if we start seeing an indictment, and that includes even of Trump here, maybe quite soon. Maybe that could be an explosive event that is also sets off a sort of catalyst of social unrest or what have you, or of protest or something I've already talked about. And it's easy to make the prediction that we'll have protests around these social actions here with the court. And we've already seen that since Mars has been going through Aries and getting closer to Rahu. We've already seen a lot of the protests and whatnot. there might be another catalyzing event which produces another type of explosive, event where people in the culture rise up and protest. Maybe it's something like Trump getting indicted, or if not Trump, well, we actually already saw Bannon. We already saw Bannon go to court and get convicted. Again, this isn't small stuff. I mean, he's the first one. He's been held to account for this insurrection. And by the way, this is, I think, and one of the things I already said is that right now people are waiting to see what the DOJ is going to do. But at some point, they better start worrying if they don't start passing out indictments to some of these people. Meadows, by the way, they're going to indict Peter Navarro. Some of these people are on record for inciting this. And by the way, I'll just flat out say it. My view is I can't believe Trump hasn't been indicted. I can't believe it's legal that they can still keep going out, him especially, can still keep going out and having these rallies where he gets up and just keeps saying this stuff over and over again. How is that not continuing to foment insurrection? There is no proof that the last election was stolen. How is it even? I mean, it's a symbol of our freedom of speech, for God's sake, that you can just get up and spread. And at this point, it's just a vicious lie because we have a court system, we have a legal system. We also already know now that he knows he didn't win, but there's no law against getting up and lying to foment a total insurrection. And it's still legal. Why hasn't he been, just for that purpose alone? And I think people are just, at some point, that's going to be the problem. If the DOJ doesn't, at least he needs to be indicted or something something needs to happen where just having these rallies continuously is just, it's just a slap in the face to the rest of the country, the rest of the world. Talk about looking like a laughingstock. The previous president getting out saying this stuff constantly with no consequences. So again, at some point, this could really get some. I would not be surprised if sometime, if not an indictment of him, then maybe another high-level indictment. Again, they already did Bannon, but he was just he's a cultural figure. But let's say Meadows or these lawyers, they're going after them now. And we just saw yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever the heck it was that the DOJ has increased has increased the focus on these investigations, and they need to. So again, I see this as very much a part of, it would be Rahu Mars even if Uranus isn't there. But given that Uranus tracks with this rise of this, frankly, proto-fascistic, non-democratic movement, is also even more telling. And particularly as I see this in the sign of Aries. And I see this as much more Aries than I see it as Taurus. But again, like I said, I can see why people might say the Taurus part is there. The other thing I would say is that, of course, whenever you get this Rahu Mars, and again, if we bring Uranus in, it can definitely show just the potential for explosiveness, including dangerous wartime activities, escalation of war. One of the things we've seen is actually a lot of good news. If you're hoping that, for example, the war in Ukraine, that there's peace eventually, or that the Ukrainians can push back against the Russians. We're seeing where American war machinery, certain rocket launchers have really turned the tide and pushed back some in Russia. And maybe I think that the fact that both Jupiter and Saturn are in their signs, we're perhaps, again, seeing more grace flowing than we would otherwise. Because again, if Jupiter, let's say we're debilitated still or whatever, we might see less grace flowing. But again, it's also kind of hard to say that to some extent because we've had some just terrible court cases coming, not just overturning the Roe v. Wade, but we've seen in the news of the, 10-year-olds being forced to have abortions, being denied, or being forced to carry babies or else go to another state. We've just seen abhorrent things happening. And again, I would put this in also in that Rahu Mars and Aries domination, that negative domination potential that we're seeing here with this kind of overlord oppression, government. And particularly, you can see, let me just bring up the the other screen again. And I definitely recognize this and noticed this before, that even the symbol of Aries, the symbol of Aries here, this is Aries, Mars, Rahu, Uranus in Aries right now, but you can see how Aries, the symbol of Aries, is also the symbol of like a uterus. And it's very much about this nakshatra of Botany, which is the female uterus. And, since Mars went into Aries, again, we've seen so many issues now and so many stories coming out of how the implications of the Supreme Court decision has really hurt, women, and in some very specific ways. Again, with the young girl, and court cases that are coming, and the society pushing back against that. So again, in general, I just wanted to bring this out and talk about how, oh, by the way, there are other political things. I'll say this because I know people are going to be like, what about Hunter Biden? Hunter Biden, Hunter Biden. Like, again, the false equivalence between Hunter Biden and Trump, Look, yeah, Hunter Biden is in the news too. Yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. I know. Why doesn't Sam ever talk about Hunter Biden? Because it's irrelevant, maybe. Like, who cares what Hunter Biden did or is doing? How about that? How about that being my opinion? He's not in government. He's not doing anything. In fact, he's not like Trump's children who were like running Middle East policy, brother, father, son-in-law, or daughter. He's a troubled man. I know Biden helped him as vice president. I know the nepotism. It's gross. It's ugly. Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so Hunter Biden's also in the news, folks. See, I got it in there. I should have predicted Mars Rahu last year. Hunter Biden was going to come into the news. And his laptop. There you go. But anyway, so again, this is some very intense times. I happen to think that, again, as Mars and Rahu get closer over the next few days, we could definitely still see some explosive events and some shocking, unexpected events. I have a feeling, though, that the way it's trended and the way it's been cutting, at least relative to the issues that I'm describing, and especially when we track Uranus through Aries, it's showing this part of it, especially with the accountability and those January 6th hearings, especially really seeing this part of it looks very clear. Other than that, there's danger all over the place with explosive potentials, but seeing a kind of restlessness and an impulse to act upon, bringing accountability, because this is really what Mars in Aries is about anyway, the willingness to fight for what's right. And again, if Merrick Garland or whoever at the DOJ is going to get the courage, now is the time. Mars is in Aries, and it has to be, and feeling the pressure and to come out and say things like, no matter who you are, we're going to indict and prosecute no matter who was involved. Again, this is rhetoric, but that rhetoric has got to match reality. And maybe we'll see in the next week or so some pretty high-level indictments handed down, at least where they've impaneled grand juries to look further and whatnot. Again, besides that, we live in this world where all kinds of explosiveness is possible. And, I'm glad to talk about the outer planets, especially when I see them as being relevant. I tend to think, again, this is my personal experience and with my practices, that they're maybe overstated a little bit as far as their impact in personal life all the time. Of course, when they aspect inner planets and whatnot, I don't use the system as much, so I don't want to denigrate it, but I don't use them that way because I don't really see them that way, and especially because Vedic astrology itself, classical Vedic astrology, you have more than enough data, particularly when you interpret it properly and deeply, to see exactly what's happening and why, without feeling like there's any sort of detriment there. So we'll leave it at that. And I will also just say again, please, if you enjoy this, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And by the way, if I offended anyone's political stuff, I know we're all politically sensitive and whatnot. I can't help but speak what I see as being the truth. I think it's pretty clear. There are people that, they're just in a different reality. Sorry if that offends you, but I'm not that sorry, because to me, there's a lot of other things at stake than offending people who want to believe stuff that's just going to maybe be the end of us all. I mean, God, I don't really know what else to say, but some people have gone so overboard in believing stuff that is complete nonsense because one man who never makes any sense or tells the truth is saying it. I don't really know what else to say to that, but yeah, accountability for those things, I think, is coming. And again, sorry if my words at times offend people like that, but I can't help but say it. That's just who I am. So like and subscribe, leave a comment if you, think this would be helpful to people. And again, if you want to see and get daily forecasts and also twice monthly forecasts on the new and full moons, you can check out the Astrology Training Lab. People wind up being members for a long time because it really helps them to stay plugged in and connected. So you have a good day.